Can we achieve permanence or legacy in our photography work? On today's episode of Develop and Process. Before we get started with this week's episode, I just want to take a minute to say thank you to all of those of you who have donated to the truck fund, and also those of you who have participated in the print sale. Thank you so much. The support that you guys have for my work is literally what makes it possible, and I'm so grateful and I owe you so much. I want to say thank you for that. Secondly, and related to this week's episode topic, I just want to say thank you to all of the brave firefighters who are outside my house right now, battling some of the most insane blazes I've ever seen. Some of you may have heard of the California wildfires. We're having one of the worst wildfire seasons in history, or something like that. And right now, I live in Lake Elsinore, California, which is on the national news for the Holy Fire. And started in Holy Jim Canyon up in the Santa Ana Mountains, hence the name. And this fire is currently at 18,167 acres and climbing fast. It is pretty much out of control at only 5% containment. And I want to say it's destroyed about 13 buildings so far, but I think only one or two of them were houses. And there's just some incredible video of the firefighters battling it out in the streets. The people over 21,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. And there's just 100-foot tall raging infernos and brutal winds and fire tornadoes and all kinds of insane things like that going on over here. The air quality is borderline unbreathable. There's just smoke everywhere in a lot of places. So we're able to see the fire directly from our house. It's about 5 miles away right now. And, at night it just looks like a volcano. We kind of jokingly call it Mordor. But yeah, it's just really insane. And all of this has had me thinking about the subject of legacy in photography. Many of the people who were evacuated were actually out of town traveling when they got the news that they were being evacuated, which meant that they could not go home to get their possessions and take them. And it also, other people evacuated from home, but they left most of their possessions at home because they had such short notice. And, in times like these, you kind of think about, what matters most. And it probably seems a little bit petty even to think about, artistic photography or landscape photography in a time like this. In fact, I told my wife, I'm kind of tempted right now to go into like a little bit of photojournalism. And there's just such a human story there of good and evil and struggle and generosity and selflessness and courage and all of that. The fire was started by an arsonist deliberately, and then now, so there's like the evil side of just him wanting to destroy and bring pain and suffering to as many people as possible. And then you have the flip side of that, which is the brave firefighters literally putting their lives on the line all day, every day to save these people's homes from total destruction. And so I wanted to, I was thinking about documenting that, and I'm just like, not really sure. I don't want to get in the way and stuff. But anyway, enough rambling. I listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of books about this subject of legacy. And there seem to be quite a few different opinions on it. One photographer I really respect says, legacy is impossible, therefore we should just not even try and just go out there and make the images we love and not worry what anyone thinks. To an extent, I agree with that. I think getting overly burdened down with the idea of how your work will last can be detrimental because it maybe doesn't allow you to focus on the present. But at the same time, I really think that we can have a legacy, and I believe that absolutely. And so I want to talk about that today, the legacy and permanence of our work. So, I was listening to a podcast this week by Brooks Jensen, Lens Work Podcast. It's a spectacular podcast, highly recommended if you're into this sort of thing. If you like this channel, you're definitely going to like that. So definitely go check out Brooks' podcast over there. It's called Lens Work Photography Podcast. And he also has a great magazine called Lens Work Magazine. But in the podcast, he was talking about this subject of legacy, and I listened to it before I knew about this fire. I was out of town, and I actually came home and found my hometown in flames. And, Brooks was talking about how no matter who you are as a photographer, the people that are most going to value your work after you're gone are your family, number one, your friends, number two, and to a lesser extent, other photographers, number three, and finally, the general public, but only a very, very tiny minority of the general public. And so the truth is that no matter how successful you get with photography, no matter how famous you become or not famous, the people that are going to care the most about your work are your family, your friends, and your colleagues, for lack of a better term, in photography. And at the same time, we often are guilty of focusing our entire careers on, or our entire photographic journey on, the general public rather than those first three groups. And I think, a lot of times we may price them out of our work, and make it, I'm only interested in selling workshops and prints and magazines to the general public because I want to be famous or whatever. And there's a lot of times you get bogged down in that mindset, and it's and then you forget that the people who actually care the most about your work are right in front of you. And oftentimes we don't make it possible for them to have our work, or we just don't care, or we forget, or we get burdened down with life and stress and the daily grind, and we forget that those people are the ones who are going to care the most. So, what does that mean? I think, it's important to make it possible for our friends and family to experience the photographic work that we create, whether that be sharing with them online, or sending them prints, or, working with them to decorate their homes, or even providing them with digital files, and they could use it for a desktop wallpaper or background on their computer, silly things like that, which might not seem like they make a big difference. Allow people to live with your photographs on a daily basis, and maybe they would rather have your photograph on their phone or their desktop wallpaper than, something random off the internet or from the App Store. The biggest way we create longevity, obviously, for our work tends to be the photographic print. Now, this gets into a whole rabbit trail, but Brooks Jensen was basically saying that while photographic prints are amazing, here's the problem with them at scale. And I love prints. Obviously, I'm having a print sale right now. I'm standing in front of one of my prints, which you can actually buy in the print sale and is the second best-selling print in that sale right now. But another thing that Brooks Jensen mentioned is that more and more he thinks that magazines and books are the primary output medium for photographers, more so than the original print. And that seems really controversial to a lot of people, but his thinking was that prints often take up wall space, cost a lot of money, and ultimately you can't own that many. Of course, I definitely encourage you to collect prints, as I do, of artists who inspire you, but the idea is that you could help a lot more people, reach a lot more people, leave a lot more influence if your work is easy to collect and mass. And so, for example, if you create a magazine that tells a cohesive story or shares a whole project, and then create multiple magazines over your photographic career, then you're able to have hundreds of prints in someone's home instead of just one or two. And same goes for books and calendars. The idea is that if you create something that is portable, easy to store, practical to use in everyday life, and easily affordable, that it's going to influence a lot more people and therefore make your photography last and matter a lot more than just one or two prints ever could. So that's just another thing to think about when it comes to permanence and legacy. Bigger isn't always better. Sometimes smaller and simpler is actually the more permanent option. So distributing your prints into the world by any means possible and necessary, I think, is number one, is super important. Number two, making sure your friends and family have access to those prints. And then there's silly things like, making sure you back up your digital files, in the cloud and not just on hard drives. Make sure you have multiple hard drive copies of your files. That way, if you're still alive, you can download those files and make new prints, and therefore preserve your photographic work that way. If you have negatives or prints that you want to store, physical photographs, maybe put those into a fireproof safe or even a safety deposit box or something like that, or storage somewhere off-site. That way, if you have to get evacuated from your home, your house burns down, flood hits, or something like that, you have that photography backed up. Those are just some practical ideas. But I want to talk about something a little bit less concrete that we often maybe forget about, and that is this idea of, number one, when we are creating those photographs, we should be creating experiences. The experience of going out into that wilderness and just seeking out that image. We're hiking, we're climbing mountains, we're experiencing nature in the rawest, purest form. Those memories will be with us for the rest of our lives. And with or without the photographs that we create in those moments, those experiences are utterly priceless, and they are completely transformative, and they become a part of who we are. And so no matter what happens with our prints, those experiences are more important than the photographs, because those experiences, like I said, they integrate with us. They become a part of our personality, of our mindset, of who we are. They change our perspective. I know they've changed my perspective when I'm out in the wilderness. The petty things of life and the squabbles and all of the things we humans get upset about and angry at each other over and stressed out about just seem to be so tiny and insignificant in comparison just to the sheer grandeur, of the natural world. And, so to me, those experiences are a big part of what it means to have that photographic legacy in my personal life. And I think that would apply to you as well. The other thing that I think is more important than those experiences, in a way, is influence. I've talked about this in previous video, link up there, but influence is more important than experience in the sense that obviously you should have an experience because you can't really influence anybody if you're not even having these experiences in the first place. But influence lives on beyond you. You have one experience, but you can influence 1 million people. So if you positively influence 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, 1 million people with your creative work, that influence will transcend you no matter what. Because, if you die tomorrow, the people you influence will go on living, and the memory of the way you influence them and your photographs and whatever your creative artwork is or output is will live on with them, both in their minds and the person that they become and who they are, and also often physically in the form of your prints or your magazines or whatever it is that they have, and so influence, and it's more profound than that. You can influence the way another artist or another photographer does their work. So you go out and you do the work and you have the experience, and then you influence another photographer or another person, and then they go out and they create photography, which in turn influences other people who are then go out and create their photography, which goes out and influences other people. And there's this domino effect of influence that just goes out into the world. That influence obviously has to be positive influence, why it's so critical to have a good mindset, and why so many of my videos are about mindset. But influence is more important than any other aspect of photography in my mind. That's the singular word I use to define success, is influence. How many people have you positively influenced? I don't care how many dollars I make or how many prints I make. I care about influence. And I don't mean that in the sense of having X number of subscribers or followers on social media. I mean lives changed, relationships built, things like that really matter and that transcend the impermanent sort of day-to-day of social media and things that we get wrapped up in. So I really just want to encourage you to have a positive influence on as many people as possible through your photography, and use your photography as a tool for that purpose. And I think if we can do that, we can really change the world through our photography, and that's going to be a lot more important than saving a stack of prints. I could go on about this all day, but I think this has covered enough topics. I just want to thank you so much for listening, and if you haven't yet, please check out my print sale. It is going on until August 16th. You get 2 16 by 20 inch signed prints for $125 shipped worldwide, which is just a ridiculous deal. And I just want to encourage you to check that out and support my work. Also, I'm running a donation page. It's at donorbox.org/Justin Lowry, and I'll also link that in the description. And that's to raise funds for my truck. And then once again, I just want to say thank you so much to all the brave firefighters out there and first responders who are battling the blazes out as I record this video outside in my town, and helping preserve people's legacies, homes, and livelihoods. And just thank them so much for that. I'm Justin Lowry, and until next time, stay curious. Oh, and one other thing I really wanted to point out is the reason I chose this scene today is it just kind of exemplifies what I'm talking about with family and friends. You know, this is a typical scene you see in a lot of houses, and we've got Christmas cards and different birth announcements and family photographs, and we've got, you know, finger paintings made by the niece and nephew. You know, and of course, one of my photos up there. And just kind of, you know, that's the sort of scene I see in a lot of my family's houses and friends' homes. And that's exactly kind of what I'm trying to talk about right in this video, is how, you know, those little things that may seem insignificant in, you know, inspiring and leaving memories with friends and family, I think is oftentimes more important than becoming famous and selling big prints in galleries or anything like that. So, there you go. That's why I filmed in this scene.